Hello and welcome to my channel. Going back, because I always forget, make sure to check out the Discord if you want to chat books, like the video, and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Back to the review. In this video, I'm going to be discussing American Gods by Neil Gaiman, and this was our January buddy read for the channel, and a book that had been on my TBR for a while. I had randomly picked up used, was interested in doing, so did that read along with RoseKayReads, who I'll link down in the description below. She'll be doing a video on this book also, and make sure to check that one out as well. So American Gods is kind of a unique story, but I'm going to try to explain it and make it make sense here. But we follow Shadow. Shadow is just getting out of prison, and his world is kind of all turned upside down when he finds out that his wife had died, and some other events surrounding that as well, just before he's ready to get out of prison. And he starts a new job working for the very mysterious Mr. Wednesday, going all around the country, talking to different people, and we kind of see the idea, basically the premise behind the name American Gods, that there are these gods that essentially came to America when people immigrated to America a long time ago and still worshipped and did the rituals, and so that kind of their belief brought the gods, or at least version of the gods, to America. But as those religions, as their followers died out or just moved on to other things or forgot them, they were kind of left here in America to exist in any way that they can. Right off the bat, I think it's a really interesting premise, kind of taking a look at these gods that have been left and forgotten. That was something too. I've read some other books that talked about that a little bit. Specifically, Malazan has a whole section kind of talking about gods that once they're forgotten, they cease to exist. And that was something similar here, but even with them being forgotten, the gods have found other ways to still exist, essentially, which was an interesting premise as well. So a couple of things I do want to say right off the bat was this is an odd book, and it seems like people are pretty, I guess, it's really hit or miss. You either are going to kind of probably really like this book or really not like this book, and I think a lot of that depends on the type of reader you are, but more so I think it depends on if Gaiman's style clicks with you, because I really enjoyed this book, but a lot of the complaints that people have about this book are completely founded and completely understandable. It is a very slow book. There are huge portions of this book where Shadow is just kind of driving around small town America in the Midwest and stopping at gas stations and Burger Kings and diners and talking to small town people and living the small town life. And it's very slow. Shadow's also an extremely dull character overall, but I think all of these things do play into part of what really made the book so good for me. And that was, I felt like everything I was reading, even though, of course, you know, some of the things when you get to the gods are obviously not the case, but I felt like everything I was reading was so real. It's my understanding that Neil Gaiman actually did go and kind of drive to these different places that are featured in his book as well, so you can actually get that first look. But as someone who has lived in small towns and been through a lot of small towns in Iowa and the Midwest in general, it all seemed very real. The people, the word choice, the food, everything, it just was so real. And even though it was very just average and ordinary, a lot of what was happening, I was just really hooked. And I think really, like I said, his writing style just works for me. I know it probably won't work for everyone. I read Good Omens, and Good Omens I loved, and it was just amazing. And Gaiman wrote a lot of the prose for that, even though it was written with Terry Pratchett. And so I got a little bit of just that style of writing, the way that it was, and it worked for me. I really enjoyed the writing style, but it is a slow book. It's pretty long, and a lot of it's lumbering. Now, I did read very specifically, it's the author's preferred text, and so it does have, I think, the extra words or extra sections. I'm not sure. I've heard there's some people who think it's better with or without. That's the one I read, and I mean, there are definitely things that probably could have been left out, but the huge level of detail to the everyday little things really is something that just upped the game for me. And in general, it was a journey that I enjoyed taking. This book is definitely more about the journey, considering a lot of it's kind of a road trip novel. It makes sense, but it really was for me about the journey. And the ending is also probably not really what you would expect either. So it's just going to be the kind of book that will definitely be hit and miss for people. If you've read any of Neil Gaiman's stuff, I imagine you'll probably like this if you enjoyed those things. The only other thing I've read, like I said, is Good Omens, so I haven't read his other books, but this made me want to read more of his stuff because I just really enjoy the way that he writes. And this was such a unique novel with a unique premise, and so much of it, too, to me, felt more like a collection of short stories than an actual long-form novel, even with how long it was. And there were passages between chapters that were little kind of shorter interlude stories talking about a specific god or a specific person, giving this glimpse into their life or a bit of their story. And there were some of those that were just so well written. There was especially one later on about a pair of twins who were taken from Africa as slaves and kind of the different paths that they went on. And that was one of just probably my favorite parts of the entire book, even though it was a very small portion and did not relate to the overall plot. But that's kind of just what this book was. Is I didn't really care that not much was happening because I enjoyed it so much just going along for the ride. I'd compare it to The Plate Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Not for any actual similarity, just because that book kind of nothing happened, but it was still really good, and I kind of had the feeling here where I was enjoying it, and because of just the level of detail, even though the character was kind of flat, it was more... Shadow, being a pretty flat character, just made the world around him seem more real. And I do like, there's really nothing special about him. You don't get any of the tropes where he's just very important or subtly good at things or anything like that. He's just him. He's just a regular guy, and that once again made it more real. So really, with a lot of those things, that's where how I kind of felt about American Gods, and I have these really complex feelings because when it comes down to it, I think I probably would have hated this book if anyone else would have written it. And after me mostly saying good things, I know that sounds probably kind of stupid, but if anybody else had written a book like this, where there's so much just kind of like, I don't want to say wasted time, but there are so many things that if you cut out, it would not harm the story at all, because so much of it is just kind of making you really feel the journey in the story. And I still enjoyed it because of the style, but I don't know. I feel like this is the kind of book that normally, if I read this, I'd be like, this is awful. Why do people like this? And so I do get, there are people who feel that way, and I completely understand where they're coming from. I just so enjoyed the writing style. It worked for me, and I can't guarantee it is going to work for you. I really think, and it took a while to kind of get used to the way the story is written, but honestly, this is a book I feel like if you start and you're not interested, you should pretty quickly be able to determine whether or not you're going to like it or not, just because while more things get revealed and built upon, and there are some different plot elements later on that kind of are weaved in very subtly, even with, it seems like there's not a lot going on. It's just a different style of book. There were, and for the most part, a lot of what happened, I wasn't all that surprised. There was kind of a twist, but there was also a lot of hints about what was specifically going to be happening with it, and so they still had it happen in an interesting way, and that was kind of the thing. There were a lot of things that were right in front of your face that you might not necessarily know. Another theme throughout is Shadow does kind of hand coin magic, and we hear a lot about cons from Mr. Wednesday and his past doing cons as well, so kind of magic, illusion, cons are a theme that's throughout, and that's kind of the way some of the twists, I guess, for lack of a better term, are. It's there for you, but it's kind of the watch what's going on the other hand, And so some of it is still, you can definitely see where it's going, but it was still satisfying to read. Now, by far, biggest complaint was the weird sex scenes, because there were some early on and it didn't continue. There weren't like a ton of them, but I have said it before, I'll say it again. I don't like sex scenes in books. I don't really find them necessary. I didn't really want to read them. And he had some weird stuff early on. Specifically, if you've read the book, or apparently somebody on my Discord said it, the specific one, the first one that was just like, why, did make it into the TV show as well. And it's just, it was weird, and I don't feel like he's very good at writing sex scenes, nor do I like reading them anyway, but it's kind of, when you over describe certain things, it makes it worse for me. So didn't care for that. I I really don't ever care for that. But that was my biggest complaint with this book, is I just did not really like that at all. So a few other things I do want to talk about in a little bit more detail and there were two. I'll note, if you want to discuss this book in the Discord, which is linked in the description, which I should have mentioned at the beginning of the video, but anyway, maybe I'll record a new intro. So I'll mention, if you do want to discuss this, like I said at the beginning, there is a link to the Discord in the chat, and there's a spoiler American Gods buddy read chat there as well. I did post my version of the book, had discussion questions, so I put those in there, and I put in my answers as well. So just kind of interesting to talk through. I'm not really going to go through those, but there's a few things I want to talk about a little bit more in depth that are going to get more so into spoiler territory. And so at this point, I'm going to warn you, the next chunk of the video will have some spoilers. I'm going to put a timestamp, as always, in the description of where you can skip forward to if you do not want to see the spoilers, or I guess hear the spoilers, because I'm going to be saying them out loud. With that, let's get into a few spoilers. So I've commented several times that Shadow is a pretty flat character. And that was actually somebody else in the Discord who read it. That was a big complaint of theirs. And once again, I completely get it. It is very true. He's a very flat character, and for me, one of the things is, once again, normally a character like that is not going to be very enjoyable, but it was a theme that kind of mentioned that Shadow was a person who, while he was alive, he never truly lived, and even the nickname Shadow, we find out, came from when he was a kid. He just kind of never developed his own personality. He would just follow around adults and just kind of hide, and we hear from his wife how he'd just kind of be there, and she almost wouldn't even notice sometimes because he was just sitting there quietly, and just how he never was really alive. And at the beginning of the book, his whole world is turned upside down. He finds out not only did his wife die, but she was cheating on him, and then she comes back from the dead and talks to him, and he finds Wednesday is a god, and they're working on other gods who are going to have a feud with the new gods, and it's just kind of thing after thing after thing. And you see this guy who already was kind of a withdrawn person, who just didn't really talk much or interact with people, and then all of these things happening, and he's just kind of like, whatever, nothing surprises me anymore, just kind of rolls with the punches. And it seems so realistic, is the thing. Is he the best character to read? No, but does he seem like just legitimately like a normal guy you probably would know in your life? Just kind of a bigger guy. It is mentioned very many times he's a very large man. Just this kind of big guy who doesn't talk much, kind of keeps to himself. You'd probably see him sitting in a bar just drinking quietly. I mean, it's like, it seems like a person you would know in real life, and so much of the story has that semblance of reality, and that's just, it was very, very enjoyable to me. With the ending as well, because that was something too that got brought up in our Discord chat. It's just kind of a weird, confusing ending in a lot of ways, and it's definitely not the ending that you would really think you'd happen anyway. But you have the old gods that Wednesday, who is Odin, is trying to kind of rile up to go against the new gods. The whole idea of the new gods being things like technology and the internet and the media and the, secret deep state black suits that everyone just knows exist. I found that to be really interesting as well, because we don't think about those kinds of things or people like as if we're worshiping them, but we do tend to personify a lot of these different things and look at them and put a lot of weight into them. And so that, the way Neil Gaiman's writing it is that this is kind of the new version of gods. And they're scared because they know that the next thing is going to keep coming out, and then they're going to be obsolete, and they're afraid of that. And then you have the old gods, who many of them have been very obsolete for a long time and are just kind of barely existing. And so nobody really wants to fight this war, but Wednesday / Odin is determined to make them actually fight it. And you start to see, and then once again, there are some hints to it here and there throughout as well, but we find at the end that it's actually a con between Odin and Loki. Loki's pretending to be the person on the other side. It's hinted quite a lot. It's mentioned, Shadow mentions every time he talks to Mr. World, the guy in charge of the new gods, that the voice sounds familiar. And there's even a scene where he notices Loki and realizes who he is as well. So it is definitely hinted, but once again, it's hinted, but it's right in front of your face while also not being. So it's really easy to miss. You know there's something going on, but might not necessarily know exactly what. And so the con to dedicate this whole battle and this chaos to themselves to make them more powerful, and see that that's really what it comes down to. And that's not really what you expect to happen, where this is being really posed as good versus evil, and you see, nope, not at all. It's just Odin and Loki being selfish and wanting power for themselves, being willing to sacrifice all of the others. And Shadow, who also basically comes back from the dead too, and finally after dying and kind of understanding things and just realizing in death what it means to be alive, which you can definitely find some deeper meaning there too, but realizing that, he goes in and just kind of basically tells them, like, no, this is what's happening. This is all to trick you into fighting. Don't do that. Go home. And he basically just tells them it's all going to be okay, and kind of just gives them a new hope that it doesn't have to be this way. We can all kind of coexist. And I think part of it too is his belief in all of them, seeing them as very real, I think rejuvenates them a bit as well. As potentially we did see that his wife, who killed somebody and dedicated it to him, maybe also kind of gave him a little bit of power to help out as well. And we kind of get the ending where these gods are changing, they think things are going to be better, and they're ready to coexist. So it is kind of that almost cop-out ending, which makes it sound so negative, but I thought it made sense with the story once again. It's not necessarily the ending you want or expect, but it makes sense. You often see in books and movies that even if there's somebody who makes that kind of plea, everyone's like, no, we're just going to fight anyway. And these are all people who it's made pretty clear they were hesitant. Very many times Wednesday is told that a lot of the old gods don't want to fight, and we get some scenes with the new gods where they're like confused, like, why are we even doing this? Like, they're all going to die off on their own anyway because people forget them. Why are we fighting a war and putting ourselves in danger? Doesn't make any sense. And so it's really all put there. It's just he's not really going to outright and tell you the way it is. He's just like, this is what happened. This is how the story happened. And it really is almost like it's just this literally happened, like I said. So that overall really are my thoughts on American Gods. Like I said, if you do want to discuss, we have a couple of channels in the Discord, link once again in the description, down below. We did for the January buddy read. Still definitely fine to discuss if you want to join for that, or join anyway as well if you want to just chat books in general. But American Gods, really, like I said, something that you probably are going to love or going to hate, and just want to try and see if the writing style works for you. If you need action and like really strong characters, so may not exactly be the book for you, but if you can just enjoy sitting back and just reading a very satisfying, albeit slow, very detailed novel, I think this is a very good choice. I did enjoy it. With that, that is my review of American Gods. Make sure to like the video, and if you'd like to see more of my content, then make sure to subscribe.